Veterans who are discharged for misconduct. And as reporter Dave Phillips found in his series for the Gazette in Colorado Springs, thousands of veterans who have met that fate in the past 7 or 8 years are the ones whose brain injuries are likely the source of the problem. Dave Phillips joins us tonight, along with one of the men he profiled in the series, other than honorable, former Army Sergeant Gerald Jensen. Thank you both for being with us tonight. Dave, congratulations on the Pulitzer Prize, which we heard of 10 days ago. You have done so much reporting and time with people like Gerald. What has caused so many of these veterans to fall into this sort of catch-22 situation?
What we found is we did a bunch of reporting about a year ago that showed that every year the number of discharges for minor misconduct is going up and up and up. This is misconduct that you could get kicked out for showing up late too many times, maybe having a positive drug test, or mouthing off to a commander. What we found is that what's probably causing this is a couple of different things coming together. One, you have more and more soldiers coming back from repeated deployments that are dealing with traumatic brain injuries from roadside blasts or post-traumatic stress disorder, things that study after study show are more likely to cause this kind of misconduct. Two, while Army regulations say those guys should be put out through a medical discharge process that would give them benefits, that process was totally overwhelmed. And so it took, on average, 14 months for that to be completed. Now, in that time, waiting more than a year, these combat units could not get a replacement for that soldier. And so a lot of times, young company commanders, think of them in the civilian world as middle managers. Mm-hmm. They're being pushed from the top to get their combat unit ready. Maybe they have to deploy in 6 months, but they can't get a replacement for that wounded soldier until he is medically discharged. And so they have to find another way to get them out. And so there was this incentive, this push to find little misconduct. Now here's the problem. Here's where it gets tricky. When you put somebody out for showing up late too many times or mouthing off to a sergeant, even if it is agreed that they have combat-related injuries like PTSD, almost all of the time they're separated from their VA benefits forever. So basically the people that need these benefits the most don't get them.
So they're sort of callously trying to fix one situation by putting these people out of the military, but with no thought to what that would mean to each individual.
In my case, the doctors, they put you in to see a chapter doctor, which he assesses everything. So, like Dave said, if one of your things that's wrong with you is severe enough that you can only be, according to the Army regulations, put out to a medical discharge, not chaptered out. That's up to that doctor to decide that. My doctors wrote immediately when I walked in there that they did not chapter me. They wrote it down, they wrote the regulation down on the top of the papers. They called my commanders and told them, what are you doing? Because most of the people at the hospital knew me. And what are you doing as far as this stellar soldier? And then two, you can't do this. And they just completely ignored it.
The commanders essentially, the doctor said, look, this guy's too injured for you to put him out on minor misconduct, and the commander said,
yeah, we're
going to do it anyway.
How they wanted me out, period. And they just caused more aggravation for myself and my family.
And Jerry had been really severely injured by a bomb blast that had gone through his jaw and part of his skull. And how many surgeries did you have? More than a dozen.
Yeah, the first time it was
and
over.
So he was actively recovering from this stuff when they wanted to get rid of him and separate him from his medical benefits.
Let's back up and say that you served in both Iraq and Afghanistan, got hurt in both places.
Yes, I almost died in 2007 with the blast, and spent a year and a half recovering. I was in a coma for 3 months, and then 4 months after I returned to Fort Carson, I volunteered to go with my unit back to Afghanistan. I mean, they would have kept me doing rear detachment or giving me my retirement then.
Right, you could have gone home with full benefits.
Yes, then.
But he went back for another combat tour.
I chose to pursue my career,
I read in the series, of course, that you have a grandfather who you looked up to and who was a POW in World War II.
My grandfather was on the Death March of Bataan. My whole family's in combat.
And is that what made you want to go back, even though you could have retired after the first time?
It was that and the guys that I was with, and it was what I chose to do. It was, I mean, this is your job here, and I'm sure you love it, or you would have done something else. But that's what I love to do, and as long as I continue to do it, I was going to try. When did
you first realize that you were on this track where people were going to give you trouble? You were in the Warrior
Transition Unit. And I had been moved over there because I had decided, and the doctors, that I just wasn't going to come back like I did before. And it's really hard to get someone into the WTU, the Warrior Transition Unit, and a lot of people called up and said, you know, we need to get him in there. He's done his duty before. We need to help him. And then every time that they would pick on some other soldiers or try their little things, I knew enough to say, hey, what are you doing? I'd stick up for them, or my family would call up and say, why hasn't my son or my nephew or my husband seen a doctor? Because I went 6 weeks without seeing a neurologist for a neck injury that was make me lose function in my arm. And they weren't calling around to help expedite that. And
that was the point at which, wasn't it, where your wife came in and raised hell, essentially, and then that got you another write-up.
Right, and they told her that she was a drunk and a drug addict because she was acting erratically, but she had a hormone imbalance she was in treatment for, which turned out to be ovarian cancer in the end, that she had to have a radical hysterectomy. The entire time she was under the treatment of a doctor that through TRICARE, and so it wasn't like it wasn't common knowledge what the issue was and what provoked her to be upset.
Yes. Dave, Jerry, of course, is one of several people that you got to know pretty well. Tell us about the situation with some of the others, where essentially sometimes somebody would come back with a problem that would cause them to act erratically, a problem that they should get help for because it happened in their service, and yet that caused them to be demoted or kicked out.
Yeah, the most clear one that we found was a young soldier named Cash Alvaro, and the first place I met him was in the emergency room in Colorado Springs. He was there because ever since being hit by a roadside bomb in Afghanistan, he had been having seizures. Now, for various reasons that are complex and have to do with some bureaucracy and some personal disputes, his unit decided that he was making up his seizures and he was just trying to get sympathy. Same with his PTSD.
A doctor said that? Or
his commanders. And actually the doctors were saying, no, this guy is wounded. You cannot kick him out for minor misconduct. He needs to be medically retired. And so the Army found a way around that. There's a safeguard that protects these wounded soldiers, and the Army found a way around, which was this. They put him in jail, charged with a major crime. The major crime was patterns of misconduct, essentially for showing up late and things like that. But they said to him, look, we're going to court-martial you, and you're going to spend time in military prison, but we've got a deal for you. Instead, sign this paper that says you willingly leave the Army and you'll be out tomorrow. Well, what that paper also does is separate him forever from his benefits.
Yes.
Of course, they didn't tell him that. So he wanted to get out of jail. He's 22 years old. He signed the paper. And he was out. And, you know, within months, he was on the street because he was too sick to work. He had no insurance. He didn't have a strong enough family that he could go home to that family and they take care of him. He had nothing. And no way to get it. He literally came up to Denver and went to the VA hospital asking for help. And once they found out that he had been separated from his benefits, they wheeled him out the door in a wheelchair with a note giving him the phone numbers of homeless shelters in town.
Oh, my gosh. Why aren't soldiers who have come back with injuries and are being treated for the injuries, why isn't there more leeway for them in the first place?
There is if your commander is educated enough or is taking the time to be educated, or in the military, the commander has the final say no matter what he says. But there's also safeguards in there that enable him to get the information he needs to make an informed decision. And if there's nobody watching these commanding officers to make sure that they're not, just because they don't like somebody or because it's a hassle for them, doing that to him. I know the young man, and it breaks my heart. I walked away, and it doesn't bother me. This bothers me every day. These other guys. This is why I'm here doing this like this, because it breaks my heart.
It's important. Dave, what has happened since the series Other Than Honorable was published last year?
Yeah, so it's almost a year since this happened. First, and most importantly, it helped all the guys that we profiled get a little bit more of the help that they needed. Jerry was probably the one who was most able to do things on his own because he fights, he doesn't give up. But the other guys just weren't in a place where they could really advocate for themselves. And so the young soldier I mentioned who was homeless now has a home here in Denver. He has full VA benefits. He's going to community college. Another soldier who we profiled, who when I met him was in solitary confinement without charge, is now out. In fact, on Tuesday, he'll find out if he's cleared of civilian charges, and it looks like he will be. He was fully medically retired, and he's back with his family. But then there's the larger question of the systematic problems. Congress is working to do some fixes, which I think are good ones, but they haven't gotten it done yet.
Something that would keep these commanders from being able to do what they're doing?
Or make it easier for veterans then to appeal to the VA once it has been done. Both things are possibly in the works. And the other thing is, of course, the Army isn't transparent about these things if they even have awareness of this. But what we can see from the data is that after we published this, the number of these types of discharges started dropping and has dropped regularly since. So is there a spreading awareness that this is happening and the Army is better at policing itself? We can't say that for sure, but it appears that is happening too.
Things are moving in that direction. Thank you very much, former Army Sergeant Jerry Jensen and Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter Dave Phillips of Colorado Springs. And that is Colorado State of Mind for this weekend. You may see the program again, including our earlier segment on marijuana edibles, at video.rmpbs.org. Join us again next week, and thanks for being here tonight. I'm Cynthia Hessen. Good night.
You know what? If every one of you would have stood up and not worry about your job, because they can't fire everybody here. They can't charge everyone here. They can't, everybody's so worried about, well, I'm not going to say it. And that's how I got the target painted on my back. Was when I first got there. And these, I was like, immediate direction. Sergeant Major of the Army has asked soldiers in the Army to do that and instructed them to do it respectfully, and you suffer the consequences. And so people don't. But I'm not going to do that. I'm the same person I am all the time.